Good afternoon, everyone. At the very outset of the closing ceremony, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our chief guest, Mr. Leo F. Saldana, the founder and trustee of ESG. We are grateful to him for accepting our invitation and becoming chief guest of today's event. I would also like to welcome Father Gerald D'Souza SJ, Director, St. Joseph's College of Law, Ms. Pauline Priya, Principal, and Ms. Neha Balraj, Vice Principal of the St. Joseph's College of Law. This event won't have been possible without the presence of our respected judges and the members joining us from the Initiative for Climate Action. I welcome you all. It is my pleasure to welcome all the participants as well as the faculty and student coordinators of the Environmental Law and Climate Justice Committee of SJCL. I would now like to introduce Nikita, our student coordinator, to take over the event from here. Nikita, please.
Thank you, ma'am. I now invite Father Gerald D'Souza, Director of St. Joseph's College of Law, to kindly say a few words.
Thank you. Good evening to one and all. We are at the closing ceremony of Climate Action Policy Hackathon 2022. Taking care of our common home is our primary concern. And St. Joseph's College of Law is committed to form students inside the campus and also outside the campus to become eco-conscious, to become eco-just. And continuing from there, we also want to understand, perhaps students to understand the real issue of this climate justice. The climate justice issue can be restricted at times for a very token celebration, and we can understand in a very limited concept of having a green campus in our own little campuses. I think the real issue is much more deeper and much more wider. The real issue that we look forward is climate justice. It is the issue of sustainable development and moreover the sharing of resources. Hence, a policy or perhaps a healthy policy or a good policy should focus on the equitable use of resources. It also needs to emphasize the responsibility and the accountability of every citizen in our country. Unfortunately, we are in a culture of claiming the privilege, but not being sufficiently responsible and accountable. And this is what we see, especially in the matter of climate justice, which is alarming all of us. I'm sure the resource person of the day, Mr. Leo Saldana, will speak more on that issue. He is fully into that issue, and I know he has got varied experience of addressing the issues locally and nationally and internationally, and he will enlighten the participants of the need of thinking in a very progressive way, how we can understand this whole climate justice in a very profound way. My special thanks to Ms. Tejaswini and Jyoti, the faculty coordinators who have taken a lot of effort in having this Policy Hackathon 2022, and also Nikita, the student coordinator. I appreciate their efforts. Let me end my message with the quote of Pope Francis. It is our profound conviction that the future of the human family depends also on our safeguard the gift of creation that our Creator has entrusted to us. Hence, we are not called to be the exploiters, but called to be the caretakers, responsible and accountable. Once again, with good wishes and wishing you all well, let me conclude here. Thank you. God bless us all.
Thank you so much, Father, for always supporting us in our endeavors. I now invite Mr. Jai Warrior, co-founder of the Initiative for Climate Action, to say a few words about the event and the collaboration.
Thanks, Nikita. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Father D'Souza, Mr. Leo Saldana, and everyone who's present here. And I would like to extend a special thanks to the Environmental Law and Climate Justice Committee of St. Joseph's College of Law, Bangalore, for hosting this event. We at the Initiative for Climate Action are really proud to be supporting this event, and I think we've also participated by providing some judges and some support on the problem statement side, and it's been a pleasure working with the team. I think just wanted to share a few words regarding the importance of this discussion and having hackathons like this and engaging students. I think we at the Initiative for Climate Action really see student engagement as a key part of climate action, because of course at one level students and young people are the future of the planet and will be taking forward the all the initiatives that we're starting. And on the other side, we're also seeing there's a lot of kind of energy and maybe even frustration from this group. So how do we now channel that beyond activism and also utilizing, I guess, the different parts that we feel are required for climate action? I think Father D'Souza just mentioned that it's not about the one-off maybe tree plantation or waste pickup kind of initiatives, but it's really about looking at it at a deeper level and seeing what are the different connections. And in that sense, having young people and students actually think through these problems, these very complex problems, and actually come up with solutions, I think is a great sign. So we're really excited with the submissions. I think we've got some great feedback that the research and things that were put together were fantastic. And we're really looking forward to hosting some of these students and actually having further conversations on how do you actually implement the policy, because I think one aspect is putting together a great policy, but then there are a lot of gaps in implementation as well, which we want to address. So thank you again for hosting this, and we're really glad to be part of this, and we're really looking forward to seeing many more such engagements. Thank you. Back to you, Nikita.
Thank you so much, sir. We look forward to many more meaningful collaborations in the future. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our chief guest for today, Mr. Leo F. Saldana. Sir is the founder and trustee of the Environment Support Group. He has a background in environmental science, and this has helped Sir appreciate India's environmental and social justice challenges from unconventional perspectives. He has gained wide-ranging experience in the areas of environmental law and policy, decentralization, urban planning, and a variety of human rights and development-related issues, working across many sectors for over a decade. He is a keen campaigner on critical environmental and social justice issues and has guided several campaigns demanding evolution of progressive laws and effective action. In this, he is a household name for environmental justice and activism in Bangalore. He has creatively supported various distressed communities to secure justice through public interest litigation and advocacy efforts, arguing as party in person in several public interest litigations, many of which have resulted in remarkable judgments. His papers and articles have appeared in many leading newspapers, journals, and magazines. Leo Sir facilitates a variety of learning programs on environmental and social justice concerns for a wide range of audiences. He was the country coordinator and faculty of the Cities in the 21st Century and Health and Community courses of the International Honors Program, USA, and co-director of the Minnesota Studies in International Development, University of Minnesota. In August 2010, he was invited as a speaker at the International Forum on China's Rural Reform in the 12th Five-Year Plan period, organized by the Chinese Institute for Reform and Development, a Chinese government think tank for reform in policy decision-making. In recognition of his contribution to environmental and social justice efforts, the Association for India's Development, USA, made him their first Sati. I now invite Leo Sir to deliver his address.
Thank you, Nikita. Thank you for the Gerald D'Souza, Ms. Jyoti Singh, Tejaswini, for this opportunity to interact with you and also share some of my thoughts. Before I share, I must congratulate each and every one of you who has participated in this hackathon. I had the occasion of seeing some of the submissions made. I couldn't see all of them. And I should say, super impressed by the quality of scholarship that has been demonstrated through these brief documents. Xanadu is obviously going to survive and survive well if those of you who participate in the hackathon could put your minds and hearts together and ensure that it works. But we are living in Bangalore or in the real world, and Xanadu is not where we live. So the challenge really is how do you translate Xanadu's solutions and make them solutions that matter to real people like you and me. Of course, a glass interface separates all of us. We are staring at a glass, which happens to be our new reality. And that itself is indicative of the kind of challenges that, despite so much intelligence that has accumulated in this world, so much knowledge that has accumulated in this world, we still have our very basic emotions guiding us, such as what is happening in Ukraine. And Ukraine is something that is in focus because it is a European country which is under attack. What is not in focus is the Middle East, in Syria, the Kurdish people who are attacked, the Iraqis whose country was destroyed, the Afghan who have been suffering for decades now. Afghanistan, let's not forget, was a country as liberal and outgoing as Ukraine has been till last week. And look at what state they have brought Afghanistan into. And in much the same way, I think India of the 70s and 80s was also, after the emergency, looking forward to get out of the rut we had got ourselves into. And we were looking forward to the ideas of peace, liberty, fundamental freedoms being substantially advanced, and advanced to such an extent that I recall, I mean, if you see in the background, there's a photograph of Father Stan Swami. And I had the occasion of, as a young student like you all, to be sort of interacting with him. He used to be then the director of Indian Social Institute in Bangalore. I used to hang out a lot there. I was part of a students' movement, and we used to use that space, and also where Gerald lives in Ashirwad, to really formulate our ideas of what the world ought to be. And I recall Stan Swami basically hanging out with us. He was never a person who came across to you and said, I know, so you learn from me. There was never a power relationship with him. It was so easy and he was a gentle giant, and he was so tall. And we used to look up to him literally and also figuratively and obviously, because he was such a man of compassion. Now, one of the things that I learned from his work and from his writings is that you can never, ever transform unless you understand the structural problems. So there is no way you can actually come up with solutions unless you work through the structures that cause the problems. And unless you address the structures that cause the problems, we are not going to have the solutions that are durable. So, which is why for the Stan Swami, for instance, would work through what most people may not want. I mean, it's not very comfortable working in central India, but he chose to work there and work with local communities, tribal communities. And one of the fascinating things that tribal communities, we can learn from tribal communities is the wisdom that has come from thousands of years, which they've held on to. One, they lean on biodiversity. And two, they lean on traditional knowledge and wisdoms, which know how to use that biodiversity. But most importantly, they know how to live with little. It is not they live with less. They learn to live with little. And compare that with Xanadu, for instance, and its problems, or Bangalore and its problems. And you realize that it is actually that it's a problem of excess that we are dealing with. Excess pollution, excess traffic, excess consumerism, basically an excess of everything, excess entertainment, excess talking, excess texting, excess sharing on Instagram. Everything seems to be in excess, that we are simply not able to process the volumes that are being generated and imbibe in us the quiet space that is required to really translate that into wisdom, right? So this is the problem that we now face. So what do you do with excess, right? You throw it out. When you don't know how to deal with it, you throw it out. So as it accumulates, it causes several consequences. And one of them manifests itself as pollution. And the chemical that we use or don't use or buy to use but never use and throw out end up accumulating in an environment in a form that cannot be processed by this amazing planet. I mean, you can, like Carl Sagan said in his wonderful essay that when the satellite was leaving, I forget the name of the satellite just now, but it'll come to me, was leaving solar system, it looked back one last time and took a photograph of this dark expanse, which was the solar system. And there were like dots all over that dark expanse. And when that photograph came back to NASA and they processed it, they saw one dot was not white, it was blue. So Carl Sagan called it the pale blue dot on which everything happens. All the histories, all the everything that has ever happened to humanity has happened on that pale blue dot, which is our planet. And I was looking up at our planet's history in terms of the, yes, it's Voyager 1, thanks Abhay. 2000 years ago, what was the population of humanity? I mean, if it was an interactive thing, it would have been nice, but let me say it, it was 200 million people or less, 180 million people. Okay, now that's the number of people you can have in 2 or 3 states in India now, all right, or in one state perhaps. In one state of one country of 200 countries. So we are almost 7 billion now, right? Bangalore has a population of officially 14 million, 1.4 million, 1.4 crores, which is 14 million, which means that 10% of the world's population, less than 10, about 10% of the world's population as it was 2000 years ago is in just 1,000 square kilometers of this planet. Now, imagine the human densities that we have to deal with, and we call this our home. Of course, it's our home. There's nowhere else to go, right? Obviously, people do sell tickets so you can go and live on Mars. It's nice. And I also recently read that there is something called a virtual universe in which you can buy real estate, so that you don't have any of the problems you have dealt with in Xanadu. So I was thinking when I read through your work on Xanadu, are you creating this virtual real estate, and then tomorrow, who knows, one of you will grab that idea and turn it into a business opportunity and make us all investors there. And will that solve my problem of going home and coming back as I did by cycle? When I was a student, I cycled a lot. And I cycled from anywhere to anywhere else. I walked from anywhere to anywhere else. Today, if I have to cycle, I have to think if it is possible to cycle, if I'll even come back alive. You see, and I say this because this morning I was in court before the Chief Justice. There were 2 cases that came up, one after 3 cases actually. One was about lakes, the other was about waste, and the third one was about roads, which is typically what we hear about every day. And these are the kind of issues that we deal with. In the first case was an issue where a lawyer brought to the court a pond which was being encroached, and all the way to the office of the court of the Chief Justice. And I was thinking, is our governance failed so much that we don't know how to take care of a pond, that we do not allow it to be appropriated by a private party? And in this case, the panchayat had actually taken the pond and given it to a private party. And there's, of course, the Supreme Court has laid down in Jakwal Singh versus State of Punjab that, it's obviously wrong. Public trust doctrine applies. And the commons are to be with the people, and it should be governed, as it were, by the people who are directly connected with it. Particular uses which are relating to that space cannot be taken away ever, and it can never be sold for any monetary consideration. These 3 guiding principles, which is very old law, goes back thousands of years. Even to this day, we have not understood how to use it. It's so simple, it's so effective, and so demanding of magnanimity of each and every one of us, that while we are allowed to use it, we should never appropriate it. And this reminds me of the Chowar Lake. I don't know if you have heard this story, but in 5 years' time, it will be 100 years when the story was actually created. Chowar Lake is a place in a region which is in the eastern part of Maharashtra called Mahad. And Dr. B.R. Ambedkar went there to basically organize a protest. And his basic speech sometime in March of 1927 was this, that after thousands of years of so-called progress of our society, we're still at a stage where the cattle have the right to drink from the Chowar lake. But you, Dalit, and me, Dalit, don't have the right to do that. Okay, and so he said, today we are going to break that 3,000-year-old rule, the so-called Manusmriti. And I want to say that Justice Nazir of the Supreme Court recently gave a very problematic speech. And he said the Manusmriti should be upheld. Now, the text is the most problematic text that we have to deal with, right? And when you have a sitting judge of the Supreme Court upholding it, I think students like you and people like me, I'm not a lawyer, should engage with it and understand what was Dr. Ambedkar's action. He was saying that you have a right to use any commons. And that right is not specific based on your caste or class. And therefore, he went to drink and he drank from that Chowar lake. A riot broke out where the upper caste came to beat him up, beat up all the others who were with him. But on that day, he resolved that he will respond peacefully. And he did. He urged everyone not to turn violent. And that campaign, which started, ended on 25th of December, on Christmas Day, that same year, when the Manusmriti was burnt. And as you know, this is the kind of struggle from which Dr. Ambedkar evolved, and that helped him craft the type of constitution we all swear by. But it's also the constitution which is now under attack by very governments which have been cast the duty of protecting it and upholding it and ensuring it is implemented. The fundamental rights are shaped and implemented by that. So the reason I bring it up is because when you see a city like Bangalore, the violence against Dalits may not be as stark, but the violence is there nevertheless. It is not so much in terms of the exclusion that can be very clearly defined and organized in small villages and small towns, and where Kap Panchayats can decide how to treat or not treat or ill-treat a Dalit. Okay? But it is there, and it is there in our purchasing power. It is embedded in the fact that anonymity can take away the discrimination that is there against a Dalit in a city. So if you are riding a taxi and you are let's say an upper caste person who has all the problems of working with a Dalit in your village, when you ride a taxi, you don't know if it's a Dalit or a Muslim or a Christian, or you cannot discriminate. You just ride the taxi, right? But of course, you won't go into his house, or you won't invite a Paura Karmika into your house. Like this morning, when I was talking to the Paura Karmika who comes to pick up the waste, I asked him to come inside so he could collect some things. I had kept some things for him. And he said, "Can I come inside?" Now I said, "Why do you ask me that question?" Right? And then I realized that, in my frame of thinking, there is no such thing as barriers between him and me. He's a human being doing a particular task, and I'm a human being surviving in that house. But that's the conditioning of society, right? It has framed him, it has fenced his mind that he cannot come inside anyone's house. You see? So this is the living condition of most of us who are not from the upper class or upper caste, who don't have agency, who aren't privileged. And we have to struggle in the same city that a rich person complains about, how dirty it is, the air is stinking, the SPM is this, it is very polluted compared to Delhi or not. Now, we did an exercise last year, exactly a year ago. At ESG, we sat down and we said, the Delta wave was sweeping across India. There was dithering in the part of the government. It was not responding. And we had seen the first wave had caused such mayhem across India. The Lakshman Rekha had become a Lakshman Rekha which protected those with resources and destroyed those without resources. And I was aghast that the Prime Minister of India even draw that Lakshman Rekha, right? And we all went and banged our plates. I didn't, of course, but many of my neighbors did in celebration of that Lakshman Rekha. That was the Lakshman Rekha which drew the line of Manusmriti. The lines that Manusmriti drew was reaffirmed by that Lakshman Rekha. And that's the Lakshman Rekha that the Paura Karmika dared not cross when he asked my permission to come inside my house. I mean, the Lakshman Rekha is a metaphor of how climate justice and climate action is actually working today. It is, in effect, responding to the concerns of the elite. And when I saw some of your work, I also was looking for, has any of you broken those barriers? Have you crossed that Lakshman Rekha? Have you looked at class, caste lines and gone out of the normative response of relying on technocracy? Because we are all victims or children of technologies today. Get up in the morning, we look at our phones. Want to order food, we look at our phones. Want to order call a taxi, we look at our phones. It's also interactive. It's so convenient that everything happens, by just a few clicks of the button. Swipe left, swipe right. Music plays, everything happens. Now you don't even have to do that. You can just call it out, and the machine responds to you. And in a world where artificial intelligence is going to be so compelling in its presence and so conducive to being isolated, that you don't even have to have a social interaction anymore. In that past, which was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, the past, that's the past. And already time has moved so fast in terms of how technology defines time, that, and we have, we should realize, like Bill Gates said, we are living in the age of documentation, right? Everything gets documented, right? You get up in the morning and I feel like this, I take a photo, it goes on Instagram. It's documented. I don't know who's following what. I also share some of my photographs of my dogs, which I think the dachshunds cannot take their own photos. I have to take it for them and share them. That's the interspecies sort of pact I have. But the point is that technology actually defines so much of what we do today, that we have outsourced our moral imperative almost. We have outsourced the value that is life. We have outsourced the bonding that is essential to feeling alive. So in the past, we would go and talk to a grocer, and I grew up at a time when there was not so much plastic. We would get up in the morning and we would go and collect vessels and wait in line, and the milk would come in milk vans, and the van would offload 30-40 liter cans, and we had to keep looking at the cans so that the milk vendor did not mix a little water and dilute it. That's the farthest we went in terms of corruption. Or later on, when the bottles came and it came with an aluminum foil, we were required to wash the bottles, scrub it clean and return it. Otherwise, the milk vendor had the choice of saying, this is not clean enough, take it back. And that day, no milk. But the aluminum foils could be collected and sold. And now we have the United Nations actually yesterday or a few days ago issuing a resolution. And when I read the resolution, I was thinking how poor the imagination of this world is. And if you read the text, it has done nothing more but re-emphasize the structures that have created the problems which we want to tackle. And I can tell you, 10 years later, you look at the text and you'll say, how, for instance, the polluters have been protected by that text. And I looked at so many groups, civil society organizations, NGOs, etc., academics, experts, who all came together to draw that 4-page text. And I asked myself, did they ever see in this the violence that our consumerism does? Did they ever ask that there was not too long ago a time when you could actually live as comfortably as we now do, when you didn't have to create so much plastic? And I use that example to also say that there was a time when I cycled in the same city, where now we have to come up with all these technocratic solutions to simply go from point A to point B. It was not so complex. You just walked out, you cycled. If not, you took a bus. Of course, the buses were crowded. And then yesterday, our chief minister issues his maiden budget. There was a demand 2 weeks ago. There was a public hearing in Ashirwad. People from across the city came together. And what was their demand? Invest 1,000 crores in the BMTC so that we do not have to struggle to travel and commute in the city. And who are we? We are not those who can afford the metro. The metro is super expensive for us. Metro systems may not allow us We are the people who are ordinary, who are working class, who are poor, who want to use the bus. How much money did he give yesterday? Zero. How much money did he give the metro yesterday? 8,000 crores. One more new line from Sarjapur to the airport. Well, Sarjapur to the airport is a lot of villages. So what choice do those villages have if a metro line is drawn there? Because there is something called a floor area ratio on either side of the metro, which will artificially make that farmland, horticultural farms, wetlands into built area. And high density clusters will come. So this is artificially constructing and creating urban sprawl. Why? Because in Sarjapur live the millionaires and billionaires, or these hoping to be millionaires and billionaires, right? But if you actually look at the quality of life in Sarjapur, it's pretty awful actually. I mean, I always wonder, where is the open space here? There's so much open space in Sarjapur. Whitefield, I remember, was a space where I could not see sunlight fall on the ground. It was so thickly wooded. Today, I look up and I cannot see the sunlight because it is crowded with concrete. All buildings everywhere. And dust and noise and pollution. And then we try and find solutions to that. So my point is very simple, that unless we actually structurally understand these problems, unless we structurally attack the problems by saying it is in land use, how we make use of the land, that we create the opportunities or the problems. And today we have created a landscape of problems. So there will be a lot of fly-by-night operators. There will be a lot of climate action consultants who will say, do this and do that. Like for instance, 2 years ago, there was a proposal to put all these machines. Basically, it sucks the air in Anandrao Circle or KR Circle or some of these prominent places, MG Road and so on, and then purifies it and puts it out. So removes the dust and puts it out. And it apparently even takes out the minute NM3 type of SPM, which is very, very minute, which can cross the barriers in our body, the blood-brain barrier even. My problem with such technologies was there was thick foliage in this city. And I recall a study of the 1990s done by GKVK, in which it looked at the power of the foliage to actually hold and arrest the flow of such pollutants, because it's a living system and it is doing it free, absolutely free. It doesn't charge anything. It just asks us to plant it. It asks us to water it, perhaps manure it, and forget about it. It's called trees. And this city was filled with them. So when I saw in some of your studies, garden city and all that, it was a garden city is from where we should look at, because I have seen the region where your college is filled with gardens. Today, every one of those gardens get destroyed. And over the last 3 years, we worked to protect one garden which would have otherwise gone underground. Meaning the garden wouldn't have been there. It would have gone into a station of the metro called the All Saints Church campus. I request you to go and visit that campus and just sit there on that bench. That bench has been laid down some 70, 80 years ago, okay, under those canopies, and just be calm. Just 150 meters away from you is one of the most busiest roads, the Osur Road, and the junction with Richmond Road, right? So when you sit there and you get that calm and look behind you, and you'll see that beautiful church, All Saints Church, built 150 years ago. Now imagine what can be the city of the future from that perspective. What would you like for not just you when you grow older, but maybe your children and your grandchildren? How would they want to sit there and imagine the city? So I think it's in the power of imagination that we are failing. There is immense power to imagine a beautiful and charming and respecting and dignified living. We don't have to be so harsh and aggressive and competitive and what are we climbing towards? Where is there to climb to and accumulate, and what do you do with that wealth anyway, right? As you can see now, that is what creates conflict. It's that kind of aggression that does not settle down easily. So we really have to understand that for climate action to become real, we have to work at the structural level of governance. We have to work at the structural level of our own imperatives of respecting each other, the conditioning that we are, the way we have been conditioned, address those conditions and see if it is a conditioning of taking care of each other, of living in harmony, not just with other human beings, but also the wonderful biodiversity on this planet. And also to realize that we have 2-3 perspectives that we carry with every step that we take forward. One is the question of intergenerationality, right? So is there an equity? Is there the action that I take, which is equitable in terms of the generations yet to come? If that's okay, if that's settled, then it's fine, let's move forward. Then that's a decision worth taking. Second, we have to look at the principles of public trust doctrine. What I have been given, handed down from thousands of years, am I handing forward with the same sort of care with which I was given? So for instance, if the earlier generation destroyed lakes or we destroyed lakes, is it possible for us to restore, rehabilitate, and bring to the next stage that these lakes remain as commons and they are holding water and not sewage, and it's swimmable and perhaps even drinkable in 30, 40 years' time? Use values that can be made relatable, not technologize it, technocratize it, technicalize it, and mystify it. And therefore, the final thing I really want to say is, can we demystify? Can we make it simple and accessible and affordable? Can we make the city inclusive? Not just for those with wealth and the capacity of aggression, but also the quiet person, the person who is subtle, who is nuanced, the artist, the LGBTQ community, the Dalit. Can we take proactive steps so that all of us can celebrate that this is our space? And when you do something like that, when you imagine such things, then I think you can imagine a metro is not something where it is a restrictive form of mode of travel. It only takes about 3 lakhs people, though it has got 40,000 crores of investment. I'm using the metro as a metaphor of how we use the streets. The streets are somewhere in one of the papers I read, it is 170% used. Right? It is overloaded already. Right? So maybe your statistic is right, or maybe it is 300% in some streets. For instance, I recall when we worked 10, 15 years ago, they wanted to tear down Avenue Road, which is the oldest street of Bangalore. The oldest, 500 years old. And there they wanted to make it a 80 or 100 feet road. Basically tear down everything. And we built the idea of a living heritage. So just as we protected the living heritage of All Saints Church by ensuring it is not destroyed over the last 3 years, and that involved, in fact, a decision which we got the European Investment Bank involved. But in the case of Avenue Road, we got the BBMP to understand there are such spaces where you cannot think of building motorways. You have to let it be. So it's that kind of metaphorical existence that we should get into. So like somebody suggested, Eric Solheim was tweeting the other day, and I was shocked. He was saying that in Pench National Park, India has done a great job of putting an elevated corridor through the forest. And I was thinking, what is the case he's making here? Is he saying that henceforth that as and when we have motor vehicles and we have to drive from Karnataka to Kerala, let's say, and we have to go through Wayanad, we're just going to build expressways? What if you can reimagine and say, hey, why don't we not use motor vehicles like that? Protect the forest's integrity, not even disturb it while having to construct these roads or rebuild these roads. In fact, organize our travel modes in such a way that we can take public transport across. You may drive to a point and then take public transport so it doesn't disrupt the forest anymore. So there are such possibilities also, if you can imagine, to live in harmony with each other and with nature. And so I think climate justice and climate action requires that kind of imagination. And I'm very, very happy that in all of your submissions that the imagination, you're like bubbling with imagination. I hope you keep those bubbles and keep those bubbles in your art so that it can keep lifting you up through this very mundane existence that we have today. But please don't live in a bubble. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leo sir, for those very thought-provoking words. I think your real-life experiences add so much to what we have to engage with and think about. I now invite a few participants of the hackathon to share their experience. You may use the raise the hand option and we'll allow you to unmute yourself. Team 35, would you like to share your experience?
We had a really good experience in we had a good time working together as a team and work in a particular format of the hackathon. Like we had a good structure was given to us, like background and then policy briefing, abstract, conclusion. So we had a good time formulating our paper and yeah.
And even when we went through a lot of the literature for the work that we were doing, we did notice that a lot of the research gap was in including the marginalized communities in policy in general, where there was a scope for understanding what it is that these communities need and how it is that they can be included in welfare policy as well.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much for organizing
and giving us the opportunity to take part in the event.
Thank you for sharing your experience. If there's anyone else who would like to talk about your experience, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed. I now invite Ms. Pauline Priya, Principal of St. Joseph's College of Law, to announce the results of the hackathon.
A very good evening. I take this opportunity to commend all participants for your very enthusiastic and encouraging participation. I also take this opportunity to congratulate the organizers for having put up such a wonderfully well thought out program and event that will really provoke and initiate thinking towards climate action that is the need of the hour. It gives me great honor to declare the results of the SJCL Climate Action Policy Hackathon 2022. The runners-up of the event is Team 35, consisting of Ms. Bhakti Kelkar and Ms. Mahima Shenoy from the University of Leeds, UK. And now for the most awaited moment, the winner of the SJCL Climate Action Policy Hackathon is Team 23, consisting of Mr. Rahul Rajashekar, Ms. Asira Raj, and Anaya Raj Bojani from the School of Law, Christ deemed to be University. I congratulate the winners and I congratulate the participants, and I encourage your spirit of being champions of this great, noble, and wonderful cause. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Hearty congratulations to the winners. I now invite Ms. Tejaswini Yu, Faculty Coordinator of the Environmental Law and Climate Justice Committee, to deliver the event report.
Thank you, Nikita. The Environmental Law and Climate Justice Committee of St. Joseph's College of Law collaborated with the Initiative for Climate Action Bengaluru to organize a first of its kind climate action policy hackathon to specifically address climate change impacts at the city level. The intercollegiate event began on the 12th of February 2022 and provided participants a platform to think critically and design policy solutions that respond to specifically urban climate change issues. The ELCJ team worked on the event over a course of 3 weeks and I believe has made meaningful networks with academicians, policy practitioners. To kick off the event, an orientation session was first organized with speakers from the ICA, Mr. Jai Warrior and Namrata Kabra participated in this, and also our assistant professor at SJCL, Mr. Gio Verghese, participated to brief the students generally about the hackathon and particularly about the nuances of drafting a policy brief. The event saw 44 registrations of teams from colleges across the country, and as we have just witnessed outside the country as well, out of which top 13 teams qualified into the oral rounds based on their written submissions. In the oral rounds, participant teams were presented before a 6-member panel of judges, which was quite a daunting task, and faced a rigorous Q&A segment as well. This was followed by a discussion session between the participants and the judges, which was extremely fruitful in terms of helping students to build connections with our judges. The discussion first started with a general feedback from the judges about how better participants could have drafted their policy briefs, but particularly devolved to a discussion on how our common efforts can bring out behavioral change in society, which perhaps is one of the most profound questions plaguing us today, along with securing political will of our leaders. The idea and inspiration for the event came from the fact that the local municipal authority of Bangalore, the BBMP, this previous year, had committed itself to implement the Paris Agreement and has thereafter taken initial steps to even formulate a climate action plan for Bengaluru. So our participants were cast in a similar role of policymakers and were presented with a problem statement which focused on the urban climate change issues faced by the fictitious city of Xanadu, bearing, of course, great resemblance to the city of Bangalore. And participants were challenged to offer policy solutions to pressing issues such as extreme weather events, public health issues, loss of biodiversity, and unequal impact of climate risks on vulnerable communities, etc. And suitably so, they rose to the occasion and submitted extremely well-crafted policy solutions relating to the same. By way of the outcome of the event and the way forward, we hope to have follow-up sessions with our participants, judges, and collaborators to deepen our climate action interventions to make them truly just and equitable. We also hope to continue our collaboration with the Initiative for Climate Action and the Environment Support Group as well to make the event more impactful in terms of approaching relevant stakeholders, be it the government or the civil society organizations, with our learnings and recommendations from the event. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I now request you to deliver the vote of thanks.
Yes. So we now come to the close of SJCL's Climate Action Policy Hackathon, and very honestly, I'm quite overwhelmed with a feeling of solidarity with everybody who has been part of this journey, and solidarity in our passions at whatever level they may be for doing something about climate change and for climate action. It is my absolute pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the committee and St. Joseph's College of Law. I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to everybody who helped us make this event a success. Particularly at the outset, I would like to extend my gratitude to our director, Father Gerald D'Souza SJ, for his encouragement and unconditional trust in the team to successfully complete the event. I would also like to extend my gratitude to our beloved principal, Ms. Pauline Priya, for her timely advice and approvals necessary for the smooth completion of the event, and our Vice Principal, Dr. Sneha Balraj, for her constant support throughout the process. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our chief guest, Mr. Leo Saldana, for clearing your schedule and gracing this event. What you shared from the stories that you brought in to your speech, your valuable thoughts, sir, are really important to us, and your commitment to the cause really shown through your words and has no doubt inspired us all. I would like to also specially thank the ICA, the Initiative for Climate Action, Abhay sir and Jai sir, for your invaluable collaboration from the stage of conceiving the event till its completion today. Now, a key cog in the wheel were also the judges. We're extremely grateful for their involvement in the evaluation process of the policy briefs and also for judging the oral rounds. And it was great to see the judges interact with the students in the discussion session as well. A very hearty thanks to all the participants for making this event very meaningful. Irrespective of the outcome, we hope you learned a lot and had fun in the process. I would also like to thank Mr. Balraj for assisting in technical arrangements necessary for the event. An event like this requires meticulous planning and an eye for detail. I extend my deepest appreciation and thanks to my fellow faculty coordinator, Ms. Jyoti Singh, and the student conveners of the Environmental Law and Climate Justice Committee, Ms. Nikita S. and Prakriti Priya, for your proactive involvement and dedication. Finally, I would like to thank everyone in the audience. It's great to see a lot of our students come in, at least for the closing ceremony, and patiently sit through the session. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you were inspired to a certain extent. Thank you so much.
With this, we come to the end of this edition of the SJCL Climate Action Policy Hackathon. Thank you so much for joining. Wishing everyone a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.